Councillor Gallant, the recording is started.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt, and good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for stepping out of one room and into another to join us at this meeting, if that's what you did. Good evening, Letitia. Just all right, now get off my screen. Just a couple of housekeeping points. Clearly, I don't have to tell you where the emergency exits are or where the toilets are, because you probably know those better than I, because you're probably sat in your house. But anyway, I can't advise you on those matters, but I can tell you that this meeting we are recording, and it will be, it's because we can't presently live stream Microsoft Teams. We've moved to Teams because a number of our partners have trouble with the Zoom, so that's why we've moved to Teams. So it's not being broadcast live this evening, but it is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Suffolk Council YouTube channel after the meeting has concluded. As Matt has already mentioned, it's really useful if you can keep your cameras and microphones off unless you are speaking, in which case please do turn them on. And that's simply because that makes the recording a bit easier to see, because you're only seeing the person that's actually active and speaking as part of that recording. So thanks for that. It would be really useful if you can also speak fairly loudly and clearly when you are doing so that the transmission can be understood. And if you could sort of try and stop the dog barking and the cat meowing, that's fine. But if not, hey, these things happen, and you may well hear Stuart barking in the background. As usual, we shall aim for matters to be agreed by consensus rather than any formal vote, which we are able to do as we move through the meeting. And I suppose the other thing I should say is you do have the hands up function. I hope you're all familiar with that. So if you could put your hand up if you wish to speak. Failing that, just knock on my screen or shove your face on my screen and I'll know that that you want to say something. So I'm going to move us on to the agenda, if I may. Item 1 is welcome, and I've done that, and the apologies. Matt, do we have any apologies?
Good evening, Councillor Gallant. Yes, we do have a few apologies this evening. Lisa Perkins from BT, Councillor Jepson, Chair of Felixstowe Peninsula Community Partnership, Superintendent Topping, Southern Area Superintendent, and Roger Wright, CEO of the Britain Pears Arts at Snape Maltings.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. I won't ask you to list everybody that is here. But it would be useful, I think, if as and when if you do join in, it would be useful if you introduced yourself and said what organisation you're from, so that any members of the public, etc., that are watching this will be able to identify who you are. So I'll move us on, if I may, to item 2. Item 2 is the minutes of the last meeting, which you have all had circulated. They're in the papers that have come to you, and we will take those, just a couple of items on there. An update on item 3B, which I'm told further demand responsive transport. Evening, Tom. Pilot is up in the Leiston area, working in partnership with CATS. And Tony Cooper is on the steering group of that, and I understand that there's no other outstanding issues not covered on the agenda of this meeting. So unless anybody has any points, queries or questions on those minutes, we will take them as read. Just pause to see if any hands go up. I can't see any, so that's a good sign. We are doing very well. I'll take us on, if I may, then to item 3. Item 3 is titled Community Partnership Board Priority 3, which is the mental health and wellbeing. And we are to receive a presentation from John Neal from Suffolk Mind. John, good evening to you, and without further ado, I think I shall hand over to you.
Good evening, Councillor Gallant. Thank you very much, and I will just share my screen. Okay, I'm going to assume that you can see that unless somebody unmutes to tell me otherwise. So Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. I've been asked to talk a bit about mental health in Suffolk and East Suffolk, and how mental health has been affected by the pandemic and what sort of thing we might be able to do to help people in our communities to recover from what's been going on over the last year or so, well, nearly 2 years now. I'm going to look at the mental health issues and challenges through the model that we use at Suffolk Mind, which is called Emotional Needs and Resources, which begins with the mental health continuum. I'll then introduce our innate emotional needs, talk a little bit about how lockdown affected us, and then look at what we could potentially do to make things better. So it begins with this, which is the mental health continuum, which is not an idea that is unique to Suffolk Mind. Lots of people in mental health now think of mental health as a continuum. We're all on this continuum because we all have a brain. Most of the time, hopefully, we're at this end, the well-being end of the mental health continuum. In any normal year, around about 1 in 4 of us will move along into mild to moderate mental ill health. In our lifetimes, about 1 in 10 of us will move further along into severe and enduring mental ill health. Now, I said in any normal year, 1 in 4 of us would experience low or mild to moderate mental ill health, because our evidence is suggesting that over the last year and a half, since COVID-19, that's more like 1 in 2 of us. About half the population has been experiencing stress and mild to moderate mental ill health over the last 18 months or so. The most important thing to take away from looking at mental health in this way is that stress is the crossover point. So stress is a point when you go from well-being into mental ill health, and stress is nature's way of telling us something. It's part of nature's signaling system. So just as a plant will have physical needs that must be met in order for the plant to stay well, so it needs carbon dioxide from the air, for example, it needs sunlight, it needs nutrients from the soil, it needs water. If one of those needs is not met, then the plant will shrivel up and die. So they're needs, they're not desires, they're not things that the plant just wants or would like to have, they're things that the plant needs. And human beings are the same. We have physical and emotional needs that must be met in order to avoid stress. So stress on that mental health continuum is nature's way of telling us that one or more of our physical or emotional needs is not being met. Our physical needs are fairly obvious and well known. We know that we need to eat and drink to stay alive. We know we need to sleep to stay alive, and we need to move or get some sort of exercise in order to stay physically healthy as well. And there are links between each of those physical needs and mental health too. But our emotional needs are a bit more nuanced and less well known. So, for example, we have a need to feel secure, to feel safe in our communities, in our homes, in our workplaces, in our schools. We need to feel that we are safe and secure. So an example of workplace safety might be feeling that my job is secure, feeling that my job is going to be there in the future, for example. We need to feel an element of control and autonomy over as much of our lives as possible. So in a domestic setting, that means feeling that we're in control of our debts. If most of us are in some kind of debt, we've got mortgages or we've got credit cards, for example, but because we feel that we can make the repayments, the debt doesn't lead to stress. It's when we feel that we can't make those repayments that debt can lead to stress, and that's because we're feeling out of control of that debt. We need to feel part of a community, part of something bigger than ourselves, because we're tribal animals as human beings. We've been walking upright for about 350,000 years, and during most of that time, we were organising ourselves into tribes because we were roaming the plains as nomads. So in a tribe, we were safe from predators. If you're one-on-one against a predator like a saber-toothed tiger or a pack of wolves, you didn't have much of a chance. Whereas if you were in a tribe or a community, you could make loud noises or throw stones at the predators and scare them away. So if you think about 350,000 years, that's a huge amount of time compared to the last maybe few hundred years or 2,000 or 3,000 years perhaps, that we haven't been at risk from those predators. So that part of the brain that controls fight or flight, the amygdala, which we nickname the security officer, it still thinks we need to be part of a tribe or a community in order to be safe from predators. So it will set off anxiety if it feels that we're not part of a community. As well as feeling part of a community, we need to feel that we're valued by that community, that we have a role or a status within that community, that our contribution is recognised. We also need to be away from that community sometimes as well to get our need for privacy met, so to calm our brains down, to get some downtime or some me time. We need an emotional connection with somebody who accepts us warts and all for who we are. And there's a picture of a cat or a dog on the card there, because some people get this need met through having a pet. because a pet will accept you for who you are, warts and all, no matter what. Most of us have another human being in our lives, however, that we have a close relationship with, and that's usually the same person that we exchange attention with. We need to give and receive attention, and we need to give and receive attention in a balanced way. So you need to receive the right amount of attention. You can have too much attention. So if you think about a line management situation at work, for example, if you're being micromanaged, you're receiving too much attention. But if you're being completely ignored, you're not receiving enough attention at all. It needs to be met in a balanced way. We also need to be stretched and challenged in a way that gives us gets our need for achievement met. That means taking on new learning, doing things better today than we were yesterday, but not in a way that becomes stressful. So not in a way that becomes overwhelming and might inhibit our need for control. So if you're in a workplace setting, for example, and a few people are off sick and you've got more work than you can actually do, if demand is outstripping supply, that's not getting your need for achievement met. That's making you stressed because you're not feeling in control. So achievement is about being stretched, not about being stressed. And it's a really important distinction to make, because stress is the crossover point from well-being into mental ill health on the mental health continuum. Stretch is good for your mental health. It is good to be stretched and challenged. And a lot of people who reach retirement age, for example, they retire and they look forward to having a more relaxing life and not doing anything, but they soon get bored and then they decide to go and do something else, like volunteer, for example, because they're not getting their need for achievement met in particular. And another need that is met through volunteering is meaning and purpose. This is about feeling that there is a point to getting out of bed in the morning. So many of us get that need met at work as well, of course, because what we do is meaningful. Certainly what I do is meaningful, and what a lot of people in public service do, they get their need for meaning and purpose met as well by becoming local councillors, for example. So there are lots of examples of how you can get meaning and purpose in your life if your work doesn't allow you to necessarily get that need particularly met. So remember, the mental health continuum, stress is a crossover point. Stress is nature's way of telling us that one or more of our physical or emotional needs is not being met. And to try and bring that to life and look at how the pandemic has affected our emotional needs, here is a hypothetical example of somebody called Alex. Before 2019, he's never heard of coronavirus, he's never heard of COVID-19, he's never heard of the word furlough. He thinks that's something that farmers do with ploughs in fields. He's getting most of his emotional needs reasonably well met, thank you very much. He's got an emotional connection with his wife at home. They spend lots of quality time together. They exchange quality attention together. They get up in the morning, they sit around the table and have breakfast together, talking about how excited they are about what they've got ahead that day. He's got lots of friends. He has lots of communities that he's part of, as well as his workplace being a community. He plays football at the weekends. He does a park run on a Saturday. He's part of a book club as well. So he feels connected to the wider society and connected to other human beings that are in his life. He's got a good job. He feels in control. He's got lots of autonomy over how he does his job. Doesn't have lots of targets imposed upon him by people from above. He has some outcomes that he's looking to achieve, but he's trusted to get on with his work and achieve it in the best way that he possibly can. He feels very safe and secure in his work as well. He also commutes to work. He's got about a 20-minute cycle ride into work and back. So that gives him a chance, particularly at the end of the day, to cycle home and switch off his work brain, get some privacy, get some downtime, switch off his work brain so that when he gets home, he's feeling refreshed and ready to see his family again. He feels calm and in control. His job also gives him lots of meaning and purpose and achievement. It stretches him, but so do the other things in his life as well. So playing football at the weekends, he's very good at football. He feels very competent at football. He scores lots of goals. He's a striker, and he likes to hear the crowd cheer him as well. He also volunteers for a local homeless shelter, helping people, which gives him meaning and purpose too. He feels competent and that he can do things and that he's making a difference to the world. And all of this is impacting in a positive way on his physical needs. He's got a very healthy diet. He jumps out of bed in the morning, like I said. Can he come and play for Ipswich, says Tom McGarry? Well, that would be great, wouldn't it? Maybe he could be the manager of Ipswich. It sounds pretty good. But his food and drink, his diet is very good. He jumps out of bed in the morning, runs downstairs. He might have a cup of coffee because, that stimulates the brain. That's one of the ways that food and drink is related to your mental health. But he probably just has the one, and it's freshly ground coffee, and he has freshly squeezed orange juice, He has flax seeds with his breakfast cereal because it's got omega-3 fatty acids in it, which is good for his brain. He sleeps very well as well. He goes to sleep as soon as his head hits the pillow, and he wakes up the next morning feeling refreshed. And like I said, he cycles to work, he does a park run on a Saturday, and he plays football, gets lots of movement and exercise, and he feels that his body is content. So he's quite obviously a hypothetical person, because no real human being would ever be anything like this. Like you, I also hate Alex, but don't worry, because justice is coming. When coronavirus happened, he started working from home and his wife got furloughed. So he's no longer living the same life that he was before. He's still got his job, but he's working from home. He's still exchanging attention with his other half, but he's not in the same way that he did before, because she was furloughed. She is not getting her needs for attention met at work. She's not feeling part of the community. He's not feeling part of his community anymore because he's been locked down as well. Their emotional connection has been impacted by this because they're both feeling stressed. His job is no longer as safe as he thought it was. He's certainly not in control of it as much as anymore. The household income has gone down because his wife has been furloughed and she's been spending lots of money. They've both been spending lots of money on things from Amazon and increasing their TV subscriptions to get Netflix and Disney Plus because they're bored in the evenings. They've got nothing else to do but binge on everything. So they're starting to get into some debt, and he feels that he's not quite in control of his debt. He no longer gets privacy because he doesn't have his commute to and from work anymore. His commute now is just switching off his laptop and going into the front room. He's no longer volunteering, so he's not getting as much meaning and purpose. Doesn't feel stretched from his job at the moment, and he doesn't have the opportunity to play football and do better on his park run time as well, because that's all been cancelled. He's no longer getting respect and status from his football team, and all of this is impacting in a negative way on his physical needs as well. Instead of having a nice healthy diet, because he wakes up feeling quite tired and sleepy because all of these unmet needs are affecting his sleep. He's doing more dream sleep and less deep sleep, so he's waking up feeling exhausted because he's got lots of emotional arousal to get rid of, to purge from his brain during REM sleep when he's dreaming. He's no longer doing his cycling to work and back, no longer doing his football, no longer doing his park runs. He can't be bothered to do them anymore, really. And into the evening, they're just binging on Netflix and ordering a Domino's and eating unhealthily and maybe drinking some alcohol as well to dampen down some of that stress that they're feeling too. And Alex wasn't alone. During COVID-19, the research that we do at Suffolk Mind through an emotional needs audit showed that the population of Suffolk was not doing particularly well at all during COVID-19. And sadly, we haven't recovered very much since that time either. So you can see here on the left-hand side, this is the average score across all of the emotional needs across the population of Suffolk. And you can see the dark blue line is pre-COVID. It's about 6,000 pieces of data from before COVID-19. And straight away into the first lockdown, which is this terracotta line, it's about 1,800 pieces of data. So statistically relevant amounts of data across the population here. Straight away, we plunged down to almost below 1. That represents a doubling of the number of people who are at the stress threshold on the mental health continuum. So just as I said, 1 in 4 doubled to 1 in 2, and there's lots of other measures of mental health across the country that have also showed that mental ill health has doubled during lockdown. So does our measure show that mental ill health has doubled during lockdown. But the advantage of looking at mental health through emotional needs is that it can guide you in terms of what to do about it. And you can see that the most affected need has been community, and that's fairly obvious really, because we were all locked up and things stopped. But what's quite perhaps worrying is that even as things started to open up again, so here's Freedom Day in August, 752 pieces of data there. You can see it's still a long way from where community was before the pandemic, and it's actually gone down again since then, this September to October. More recently, it started to creep back up again. The very latest figures that I looked at this morning, it started to creep back up again, but it's still a long way from where it was before. And the advantage of looking at mental health in this way is that what I mean by guiding what we can do about it, if you had £1 million to spend on a mental health intervention, for example, you might think, well, okay, let's do some mindfulness courses. And I've got nothing against mindfulness, but in many ways, that's a way of getting your need for privacy met. And you can see here, up until recently, people were getting their need for privacy met. It was an all-time high. So that wasn't really going to have as much impact as helping people or enabling people to get their need for community met. Enabling community activities to open again in a COVID-safe way is the biggest impact that we can possibly have on people's mental health at this particular moment in time. These other needs, meaning and purpose, receiving attention, status, some of those come back through working and achieving as well, getting the need for achievement met. Some of those come back through work, some of them come back through volunteering, for example. All these different things that we haven't been able to do as much, or that have changed in terms of how we do them. All of those have been affected by the pandemic. This is just to give you a bit of context. This is the question that we ask in that emotional needs audit, the questions, sorry, that we ask. And we ask people to score from -3 to +3, and then we create the averages, which is what you can see here. So what can we do about it? Well, there's a half-day workshop that Suffolk Mind puts on called Your Needs Met, or sometimes we call it Suffolk's Needs Met. You can actually access it for free as a member of the public if you become a friend of Suffolk Mind, and that is a free thing to do as well. That's on our website. Or we could, if we were commissioned, for example, or if we get grant funding, we can put on more of those online interactive events too, and that enables people to look after themselves and the people around them better. So it teaches you skills to understand what's going on in your own head, to understand the context around how your emotional needs should be met, or what barriers there are to meeting your emotional needs. We have something called emotional wellbeing in the classroom. At the moment, anecdotally, we're hearing that teachers in particular are really experiencing mild to moderate mental ill health and stress. Some of them describe being on their knees and on their last legs. They're certainly looking forward to Christmas, but they are not looking forward to coming back after Christmas to what is much more stressful job where they're not getting their emotional needs met as well as they were before. We have a piece of training called Emotional Wellbeing in the Classroom, which we sell individual slots for teachers and teaching assistants and leadership team members of staff and any staff in a school, that we can do a day online, teaching them skills about assessing the emotional needs in the classroom, helping them to manage the emotional well-being of the classroom, and also helping them to look after themselves too. And we do some action planning in that as well. We're about to develop a course called Overcoming Anxiety and another one called Overcoming Anger. We've got lots of training existing at the moment, but these are two things that we're looking for potentially commissioning opportunities to help us to get those up and running and start piloting them among the population too, to help people to in how they're responding to the pandemic. And these are just a few examples of some of the feedback that we get from, this is our most popular course, which is Your Needs Met, which does what I've just done in 10 minutes. It does in about 4 hours interactively online. It gives you an awful lot of skills and knowledge to enable you to be aware of your own emotional needs and the emotional needs of people around you, whether it's your children that you're bringing up, or your friends, your family, or your workplace colleagues, whoever it is that you're supporting in the community or outside of it. That's some feedback from Emotional Wellbeing in the Classroom, the latest couple of sessions of that. And we also do a couple of other courses too. And sleep is another thing that we need to focus on as a health system more broadly. And you'll be hearing a lot more from Suffolk Mind about sleep next year, because we're declaring 2022 the year of getting better sleep in Suffolk, because the number of people who are not getting a good quality sleep is around about 2/3. And again, that's doubled from before the pandemic, when it was 1/3 of people. Even that was bad enough. 1/3 of people not getting a decent night's sleep is a serious mental health concern. But the fact that it's doubled means that we really need to focus our attention on it now. And I was asked to suggest what some money might buy if anybody did have some spare cash lying around in any particular grant pots. We could put on more of the Suffolk's Needs Met or Your Needs Met sessions at 950 quid each, and we could spend some money marketing them to different communities in East Suffolk, and similarly to tackle what is an immediate need, which is helping teachers and teaching staff to get their emotional needs met and to manage their classrooms and to manage their stress. Funding some emotional wellbeing in the classroom sessions for some schools in East Suffolk would be something that we would be keen to do. And then if we could be funded to build and develop are 2 new courses that we want to create: overcoming anxiety and overcoming anger. That would be marvellous, and I haven't put a price on those really, because anything that could be contributed to making those happen would be gratefully received. That's it. Any questions?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's a number of questions. I can see Nicole's stuck her hand up as hang on, I'm just going to bring in Matt, because I don't know if that's an organisational thing. Matt.
Thank you, Steve. It was just to make you aware, I've just received an email from Susan Harvey just to say she's been unable to join the meeting this evening, and offers her apologies for the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Matt. John, just a couple of points from me before I bring Nicole in, if I may. First of all, a really interesting presentation. Moved on a long way from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which has been drummed into me many years ago and many years since. So we keep banging on about that. I was really starting to like Alex at first, and then of course you were speaking about flax seeds, and that was the end of it. That's him and me gone now. They're for budgies, not for people. But that was quite interesting. I suppose the Community Partnership Board and the Community Partnerships and East Suffolk Council very much are data-led, or try to be data-led, so we understand what it is that's going on. So I was really impressed with the emotional needs audit, and that was a real eye-opener for me, seeing actually, people are talking about mindfulness and doing this and doing that, but actually are we honing in on the real things, which I suppose leads me on to my actual question as opposed to a comment. Is, I suppose maybe it's just me, but are you finding online courses to meet the needs? Because it's almost like I'm spending my whole day in front of this screen, and now you're asking me, I know you're not asking me, but hypothetically you're asking me to spend yet more time looking at this screen in order to address the issues that this screen is causing. So how do we square that off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So firstly, on Maslow, even Maslow towards his later years admitted that putting them in a hierarchy actually was a bit of a mistake, and that his model was slightly lacking. And so we don't put them in a hierarchy necessarily, but it is a model that most people are familiar with. So what we say, they all exist on the same level, essentially. If one of those needs is not being met, that's what can lead to stress. And if the stress is unaddressed, then you move along the mental health continuum. So that's the thing about Maslow. Yes, and I mean, you're absolutely right. The best way to deliver the training that we develop is face to face and in group settings where you can actually see human beings. I mean, that's about the presentation that I've just done. When I used to do 2 or 3 of those a week in face-to-face settings, there would be jokes, there'd be gags, there'd be funny stories about my kids. But because I can't see anybody, and I don't know whether anybody's laughing or not, you tell a joke and no one laughs, and you kind of think, oh God. And I remember the very first time I did an online presentation, I tried just doing an online version of what I'd done before, and it felt awful. So I had to completely change it, and I brought in the example of Alex with a little bit of humour about his flaxseed addiction, and that's the best that I could do, really. But you're right, these screens take your attention in a completely different way to how your attention was taken through human interaction, and getting back into human interaction is now becoming quite exhausting as well, because we've lost some of the patterns that we used to just automatically have in our brains to help us to read body language, for example, to navigate a physical meeting, for example. And there is there's lots of research. There's more research around these things, which we call attention harvesting devices at Suffolk Mind, than there is about screens. But it's the same thing, and it affects people's sleep. I'm pretty sure that I don't have evidence to base this on, but I would bet money, if I was a betting man, that the part of the doubling in the number of people who are sleeping terribly is due to the amount of time they're spending on their screens. So yes, as soon as we can deliver all of our training we can deliver in both different ways. It's taken us a long time to build up the capability to do it as well as we could face to face in an online setting. So we didn't do it straight away because we wanted to do it really well. But yes, I would agree that it's more effective when we do it face to face, if we can.
Okay. So is there, how do we get back? I mean, we know COVID, we're not at the end now. We've got this new variant now. You know, we're going to come out of Christmas potentially with more infections brought on by the Christmas get together, although we won't be snogging under mistletoe, as we know. But you know, how do we move away from the screen to back into the classroom again? I mean, are you planning that, or are you still in the wait and see?
No, all of our training can still be put on face to face if organisations want it. So it's basically demand driven right now. So those two things that I said, the Your Needs Met sessions can be done face to face. We have delivered face to face in health settings recently, and in schools. We were in a school. Have we done one this term? I can't remember. But we have done some stuff in schools as well this term. So we can do it, but it's just whether people want it or not. So we make it all available, and then it's up to people whether they want to get us in and deliver physically.
Okay, thanks. I'll bring Nicole in because she's patiently had her hand up.
Thank you. Nicole Rickard, Head of Communities for East Suffolk Council. More a comment really, just to say to everybody, I had asked John to think about what we could do as a community partnership board to support people's mental health and well-being. And in item 5, we've got a paper which is proposing setting up a small task and finish group to focus on mental health and well-being. And one of the things I'd said to John was that we'd developed some outcome proposals to bring back to the March meeting of the board. So I'm very much hoping that you'll work with us, John, on that, and we will come forward with some specific proposals.
Yeah, happy to, absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. Letitia.
Thank you, Steve. John, thank you. It was a really good presentation. I think actually it's probably opened up all of our eyes to the fact that some people may be struggling with stress but don't realise it. So this is probably reaching out to people at a time when you can change the direction that they're going in, because if they realise they can fulfil some of these bits that are missing, change a habit and obviously get back on track again. So yeah, I thought it was really brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think there's probably a few people even on the call this evening that might recognise themselves as being an Alex.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the other things that I do when I'm delivering this face to face is interact with the audience a bit more. And the way that I normally start is by asking people what are the signs of stress, and ask them to sort of just shout them out, because there are so many of them. And sleeping poorly is one of them. There are lots of others like irritability, and some people get a rash around their neck, or some people get backache or migraines. There are loads and loads of signs of stress. So what we're trying to do across the population in general is just raise people's levels of awareness that those are signs of stress, that stress is nature's way of telling you that something is wrong, and that what is wrong, this model can guide you to look at what might be wrong in your life. And during the pandemic, we found that lots of people were experiencing mild to moderate stress and mild to moderate mental ill health for the first time in their lives. I remember doing this presentation with Abellio Greater Anglia, and one of the train managers or train conductor to you and me, he put his hand up and asked a question the same way that you guys are doing now, and said that he suddenly realised why he'd been feeling down recently, and he couldn't understand what was wrong with him, because he still had a job, he was still going to work every day, he still had a supportive family, he still had the same friends, he felt his job was secure, so had plenty of money. But he realised that although he was still going to work during the pandemic, his trains were empty, so he wasn't getting his emotional needs met. His need for community, his need for respect and status in particular, his need for achievement. He wasn't being stretched and challenged. He wasn't motivated by making sure that his train ran in an orderly fashion. He wasn't getting meaning and purpose from his life anymore. And he was experiencing mild to moderate mental ill health for the first time ever, and had imposter syndrome. And he couldn't understand why he was doing it. He was thinking, no, I've got a great life, I shouldn't be feeling this. And the model helped him to understand what was actually going on in his life and why he was feeling it. one of the reasons that we like this model.
I think that's really very relevant, John, in that, you know, there certainly, you know, I'm the sort of person that thinks, look how lucky I am. Look, you know, all my needs are met. You know, I'm financially stable. I'm in a loving relationship. I've got everything around me. You know, yet some days you get up and you think, actually, I feel rubbish today. But I shouldn't be feeling rubbish. Look at what other people are going through. So, you know, it is that identifying in yourself as to those things. So that's really useful, really insightful. Thank you. Stephen Singleton. Good evening, Stephen.
Hello, Steve. Thank you very much. So, Stephen Singleton, Suffolk Community Foundation. John, I just felt I've got to come and speak publicly and endorse what you've been doing. As a funder, we've funded projects for you that you've mentioned, but the best way to be a good investor in activity is to actually experience it yourself. And the foundation team, as you know, have gone through the program with you, and it is the most extraordinary thing that we've done on mental health. Probably that, and being put in, as well as being put into the environment with other colleagues that you know. It's quite extraordinary how it realigned our complete thoughts of how mental health gets a hold. And the word is, it's a continuum, which you've only had to touch, you know, you briefly touched on today. But if you don't address it, it gets worse and worse and worse. And that's obvious, but it, you know, it finishes up in really quite difficult situations if it's untreated over years. So I wanted to publicly endorse it. And I think the challenge is how can we roll this out on scale? I mean, you haven't touched on young people's mental health at the moment, but it seems to me that there is a way to put this through an assembly with kids and to fund it and to get through the schools. There's 250,000 people living in East Suffolk. You know, it's a difficult challenge to get to them. Could parish councils be involved? So Nicole's mentioned that there's a task force being developed, but I would like to think there's some way of scaling it up and to really let more people benefit. The other thing that I can say is that after probably, we did it about 3 years ago, the first cohort. I've done it twice actually, but it's like yoga. You do have to top in, you have to go back in at some stage because bad habits creep in and you've got to fight those back with the good things you teach people. But to everyone else on the call tonight, I cannot stress how wonderful a program it is and how it can help everyone, even if you don't have mental health issues, to help you understand the issues.
Thank you, Stephen. I mean, I couldn't agree more, obviously, but the opportunity really is, so if I draw an analogy with my own family situation, for example, my wife, 2 times I've done a mental health intervention, if you want to call it that way, with my wife, and it wasn't really a mental health intervention. All it was that she was snapping at the kids a lot. This was a few years ago now, which is irritability, which is a sign of stress. And we basically, in a calm moment, sat down and did an emotional needs audit and worked out that she wasn't getting her need for privacy met at the time. She didn't have any time to herself. So we worked into the week some time to herself, and sure enough, the irritability stopped. And then more recently, her job has changed as well. She wasn't getting meaning and purpose or achievement or respect and status from it in the way that she used to. So I prescribed to her, I bought her a bass guitar last Christmas, and I prescribed that she had to learn how to play it to get her need for achievement met, and then she'd be able to play it to other people and get her need for respect and status met as well. She could play it at church. She goes to church on a Sunday morning. She plays a keyboard at the moment, but she could be playing the bass guitar too to get her need for meaning and purpose met that way as well. And again, the feelings of, yeah, she's feeling quite low and blue, and then she, because of the work situation, but since she started doing that and focusing her attention on it, she started feeling better again. So one of the great strengths of this approach is that you can help your. Something's wrong with the TV. Okay, can you do something else for a little bit? I've got to go. Okay, maybe read a book. Sorry, that's my my 7-year-old who I can't control because she's got her need for control as well, and she can't work the telly at the moment. But yeah, it helps you to raise your family, it helps you to help your friends, helps you to help your colleagues, and scaling it up would be brilliant, Stephen. And what we've thought about in the past, and the pandemic came along and kind of stopped some of that thinking, was training up community leaders of one sort or another. So local councillors would be one, but hairdressers would be another, brownie pack leaders and scout leaders would be another group of people. Anyone who has any kind of interaction with members of the public, scaling up that training so that there are more people who are familiar with the model and the language, and therefore in a position to help people more.
That's really good, and you couldn't have a better endorsement than Stephen gave you there. So I'm sure when we come on to item 5, there'll be hands going up to join this task group. So many thanks for that. Good evening, Susan. I wonder, Susan, could you turn your camera off because you're making us all look hungry? Perfect.
Well, at least I've managed to join eventually.
You have, and welcome, and it's lovely to see you. And Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good evening. Thanks, John. Very, very interesting. 3 years ago, I'd done a mental first aid at work course, which again, very, very interesting. I think to me, sometimes it's about putting those support mechanisms in place, isn't it? You know, knowing where that support is, because it's the old bucket analogy, isn't it? You know, if you've got more coming in than you can get rid of at the bottom, that's when things tend to overflow. But I just want to make the point also in that, you know, I think stress sometimes is a very overused word, and I think a certain amount of stress is actually good for you. I think you need that adrenaline, you need that little bit of stress. Is, as I say, when things get a bit too much, I think is when the issues are. But to me, it's about education. So can we do more of those mental first aid at work sessions? I think they were really helpful. It's about education, about people understanding the signs, perhaps, of their workmates, you know, because they're in probably, if you look at a work situation, I know it's difficult because a lot of people are at home at the moment, but in a work situation, people are probably with people more than their partners, perhaps often when they're in the work situation. So it's about, you know, understanding the mood changes, isn't it? And understanding when somebody's, you know, a little bit as they are normally. And that was through education. That was through the first aid at work training, which people could then identify and then, you know, get some help for their teammates or something else. So can we do more of that? Is that sort of on the agenda?
So, well, two things. Firstly, I understand what you're saying about stress. And we tend to think that it's better to have two different words for two different things. So stress is a crossover point from well-being into mental ill health. Whereas the distinction I drew was with stretch, the word stretch, which is good for you. And that's a way of getting your need for achievement met. So you can still have, you know, bursts of adrenaline by being stretched and challenged. You definitely do. And being stretched is crucial for good mental health. If you're not stretched, you don't get your need for achievement met. And if that need is not being met, then you start to move along the mental health continuum. So we try to kind of draw a distinction. Rather than saying a bit of stress is good for you, we say stretch is good for you. Stress is where it's something different and it's something else, and that's a crossover point on the mental health continuum. On mental health first aid, so we don't train mental health first aid, but we do train I think about 250 different workplaces that we've delivered training in, but different training. So it's based on this model, and the reason for that is a lot of employers have said to us that they trained up mental health first aiders and they did their training, and then a couple of years later when something happened, they'd forgotten everything that they'd learnt because they weren't putting it into practice on a daily basis. Whereas with this model, you're putting it into practice all the time. Although, as Stephen Singleton said, it's good to get refreshers from it, but you can use the model. If you've got, when you do the training, you get a pack of the cards that I was showing on the screen earlier on, and these are the children's version. So Stephen mentioned about schools, and we do this for a version of the same training, same model in schools as well. But what you can do is when you notice that your other half perhaps is shouting at the kids more, or is looking a bit blue, or is a bit irritable, get your pack of cards out and go, okay, which emotional need is not being met at the moment, or let's put these in order, or let's score them from 1 to 10 each, and then you can focus on getting one of those needs met, so you're preventing the mental ill health from happening in the first place, rather than kind of spotting that something worse isn't wrong a bit later on the line. So mental health first aid is good for particular situations. It's good for helping people at a crisis point, for example. And what we do is trying to work a little bit further along before things start to get to that position. If that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. And he can't be manager of Ipswich, Alex, because his name's not Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. John, as I say, really useful. I think you're an incredibly brave husband. Can I just say that? And I'll leave that one hanging there. I'm going to move us on though. So many thanks for that. And we will revisit this subject on agenda item 5. But in the meantime, I think you need to go and sort the telly out. And we'll move on and come back to this in a bit later. So many thanks.
It's just me and the 7-year-old here at the moment, so I do need to go and do that. But
you go and
to be involved in the task and finish group if it's helpful.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for inviting me along.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Okay, team, let me move you on if I may. And I'll move us on to item 4, which is the focus on community partnerships, pages 8 to 25 in your papers that you've got there. And I think Letitia's going to introduce this. Are you not, Letitia?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's the part of the meeting that I get most excited about, because this is the part where actually our community partnerships can actually come back and give us some information on what they're doing. So before we introduce the two that are going to do presentations for us this evening, I just want to sort of say that what we've aimed to try and do is to get a community partnerships back meeting in place. So everyone's been endeavouring to try and do that. But this evening we've got some feedback coming from Felixstowe Peninsula and Lowestoft and Northern parishes. So if we'd like to start with Felixstowe first, thank you very much.
Thank you, and I think we've got Sharon here, haven't we? Because Mark's not here. So good evening, Sharon.
Good evening. Yeah, it's the joint presentation. So I'm Sharon Harkin, and I'm Vice Chair of the Felixstowe Peninsula Community Partnership, and I'm joined by Chloe Lee, who's our Communities Officer. So over to you when you're ready, then, Chloe.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, we've got that. You're just a little bit quiet, Chloe. If you could just move that mic a little bit closer.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so Felixstowe Peninsula Community Partnership has 4 priorities: social isolation and loneliness, physical health and mental well-being, education, so raising aspirations, ambitions and standards, and community spaces and physical enhancements. But we are aware that in light of new data, that Felixstowe now has an increase, or the highest percentage of childhood obesity in our region. So that's something we're going to have to consider going forward. Next, thank you, Chloe. Back one. So just to shout out about some key achievements, we undertook a rural proofing exercise that really strengthened our relationship with our rural partners and has increased their engagement in the partnership. We had one small grant scheme, which was oversubscribed and funded 8 projects that obviously relate to all our 4 priorities. And the total project, so that's the small grant scheme and the outcome proposals, the total number is 25, coming in at around £60,000. And this is just a breakdown of our funding against the projects in percentages. So community spaces could be something like Waldringfield and their playing field, upgrading their play field. Health could be the provision of blood pressure monitors for local GPs to give out to the local community, to the provision of face-to-face mental health services outside the NHS for the local community. And I'm now going to hand over to Chloe, who's going to bring 2 of the other priorities to life.
Thank you. So these are some pictures of some of the projects that we've recently funded. The first one is Felixstowe Library. The partnership supported the refurbishment of the children's area in the library, along with some other match funders. And since the summer, the manager has confirmed that the children's library has been a great success, citing one mum who lives in a village just outside of Felixstowe. She had a baby in the first lockdown and she felt really isolated and lonely, and said that the library events in this space have made such a big difference. Her baby's been able to mix with other toddlers and she herself has made new friends. Chat benches, some of the partnerships have already delivered this in their areas, but the Felixstowe Peninsula Partnership recently decided to implement this in each of our 11 rural parishes. They've been nominating locations for up to 2 benches each. That aims to help alleviate isolation and loneliness, as well as all the other physical and mental health benefits that these benches promote. The picture that you see there is in Elmhurst Park, so it's just an example. The Salvation Army, on Christmas Day, they go above and beyond. This year, with funding from our partnership, they will be providing 80 Christmas dinners for those that would otherwise be alone and isolated. It includes a 3-course meal, festive entertainment, and a supper to go home with. And lastly, Felixstowe School, another match-funded library project, but with a very different feel and priority focus. The grant has been spent on reading books, audiobooks, other devices, headphones, large PC screens and new furniture. But in addition to this, the grant has meant that the school facilitates extra reading clubs and intervention programmes. That was a very brief tour there, so we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Sharon and Chloe. Clearly, I'm a member of Felixstowe Peninsula Community Partnership, so you won't get any questions from me apart from to particularly thank Chloe, and I know Sharon won't mind me doing that. Specifically, thank Chloe for all the work that she does right across the peninsula. It's invaluable. So many thanks for that. Any questions or comments from anybody? James. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Just a very quick question to you both. Lovely little presentation. I'm just interested to know where the ideas came from. Is that something that you went to the communities? Was it community-led or particular idea, or did it come from your little board? How did I love the talking benches. I thought that was a really great idea. I'm just interested to know how these ideas came forward.
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, Chloe, because the benches was something that was trialled elsewhere first, wasn't it? And we brought it to the partnership, but yeah.
Yeah, so it was definitely an idea that we saw and really thought great benefit from the other partnerships. But what actually happened was it was brought forward by a small task and finish group for the rural proofing work that we did, and Sharon was chair. So it was out of that we decided to do a joint project for our rural parishes to make them feel not only more included in our partnership, but for them to share that is going to give them really something quite invaluable, really. So I like to think that most of the projects that we've done have been quite community led and focused. There's lots of conversations happening all of the time through various members of the partnership. So there's good conversations and projects that come out of it.
Brilliant.
I think we've always got our ears and eyes open, haven't we, Chloe? So as we're going around the community and listening and looking for those opportunities that fit in with the priorities.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And I think this is I think you've identified there, James, one of the challenges of the partnerships going forward, which is about making sure that those ideas are flowing from the community into the partnership rather than from the partnership out to the community, because we want people to tell us what's important, not us to tell them what's important. So you make a very, very valid point there. Susan. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, we were actually approached by somebody on our parish council as to whether we would like a couple of benches on our new community woodland thing, and we said yes please. That seemed like a jolly good idea, so I will report back when they've been installed and see how many of the community actually sit on them and have a natter, which is really what it's all about.
That would be great, Susan. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move us on, if I may, if there's no other questions for the Felixstowe one, to the Lowestoft and Northern parishes. And we've got Paul Ashdown, who is the chair, and Louise here, who's the one that does most of the work. Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to say that. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And yes, Louise does an awful lot of the work, I must admit, but we are fully behind her. just as this is just a little presentation of what we have done over the year. If you want to move on, Susan. Louise, the next one. Can we have the next slide?
Louise, are you just able to go into presentation mode, because that's coming up a bit small on the screen?
I mean, these are the
Can you not see that, Matt?
We can see it, but it's not in presentation mode, Louise. I don't know if you can click that little, enable that little box at the top there.
What box?
It's the icon there. It looks like a screen pulled down with a play icon in the middle, just 2 to the right of the save button. That's the one.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Click start from the beginning. Start from the beginning.
Did you click on that, Louise?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Louise, it might be you need to share your whole screen rather than just the PowerPoint app. That might be why the presentation's not coming up.
Oh, can you see that bit?
You might just need to end your screen share, Louise, and start it again to share the presentation view.
Right. Okay. So.
Okay. Now share the presentation once you've got it open.
Can you see that?
No. You need to click share screen.
Oh, okay. Let me. Hang on. Let me go back.
Thank you from Paul and Danny.
Right, can you see that now?
We can, but go right to the top because we're seeing the last one.
Click on one and see what comes up, Louise.
It's in a different screen again. I'm going to have to unshare again. Sorry.
On one?
No, I can't see it. It's gone to the full screen. Right, let me come out again. Sorry.
While Louise is doing that, I'll carry on with a bit of talking. Obviously, we've had the small grants which we've utilised in the last year, and we put that.
Can you see that now?
That's better.
That's the one.
That's the one. Okay, and we've used the rugby club for the minibus. We've funded that and the healthy movers. We've put some equipment into Corton fitness equipment, and Lown Parish Council has a wellbeing board, and obviously we have used Voice for a Friend with NESCAB over last year. Can I have the next screen, please? So the last off mile walks are going well, very well indeed. In actual fact, now some of the schools are actually using the walks in demonstrations in their history programs at school, which is good to see. The Boys Respect group at the Seagull Theatre, we did one for the girls before, and that's gone in for another small grant. And the reutilised wellbeing craft drop-in shop in Lowestoft, where you can take your paint and go and buy everything else you want to do. Orton Happy Circle, which is a group of over 80-year-olds, and they needed funding to be able to carry out their cleansing after COVID so they could go back to meet. And Summer Leighton School had an outdoor allotment given to them. So we have funded the ideas for them to actually be able to look after that and produce food and grow vegetables, etc. And this is something which is very close, and we're going to actually progress that. We have another school who's put in a bid in South Lowestoft for a similar sort of project, which we're going to look at our meeting on the 15th to see how we can help with some of the balance of the funding that we've got for this year. Walk in the Park and the Sunday Club have now started in a small way. The Walk in the Park's for families to wander around for about a mile, and the Sunday Club is for those young people with that to be able to meet in Sam's Cafe in Lowestoft afterwards and just have time to meet and talk and help. Can we have the next slide, please? On Saturday, the 12th of February, we are planning on having an event at Park Hill. We were discussing this earlier on today, and this is going to be in the form of like a market stalls, where we're going to ask people to come in, show us what they've done, and we're going to have reutilise there. We're hoping we're going to have Summer Leighton School. We have been given and supplied, that Danny's been able to load and I've been able to get hold of, some pallets. So we've gone to people who are going to have planters made for the schools. Phil Aves was with the schools last week, and we reckon we've got probably 10 schools who wish to come into the project for growing of vegetables and gardening and give them that sort of work, which we're hoping to feed. And Danny and I are very much liking to talk to some of the other big companies within the area to encroach on some of their funding. So that's in the plans to see where we can go. Can I have the next slide, please? And here you can see where we've actually placed the funding, all the checks that we have issued. So the first one on the top left-hand side is for the rugby club bus, so that they are volunteer drivers who go out to the villages, pick people up and take them to the Tesco's at the top end of town, where they can actually travel to anywhere else and get public transport, because there's no public transport out in the villages. This is also something that we're looking at with Jack Raven, and the questionnaire has been produced, and that is now in its trial consultation with the chairs and other members of parish councils in the area. So we're hoping we're going to get the full one out to the general public either just before or just after Christmas. The second one there is Summer Leighton School, and there's Danny and I with the ex-head. She retired from school at the end of the summer term, but the new head is very keen to keep this going. Reutilise on the right hand side at the top, that's part of their shop that they have in town, so you can see all the things that they do. Very, very efficient in the way that they run. The bottom right one is some of the people who use the rugby club bus to travel to get their shopping, and they're very, very grateful for that. And the bottom left, you can see there is the Alton Circle, the over 80-year-olds with their check for their cleansing of Alton Hall. And to the right, next to me there is Brian Hunter, ex-councillor Brian Hunter, who used to be with Waveney District Council for many, many years, and has been an avid person to raise funds for different functions. And it's actually nice for us to be able to do the same for him. Can we have the next slide, please? And that takes us to where we launched the mile walk on the seafront, Danny and I there, and we think it's been absolutely brilliant. But we're looking forward now to, as I say, to getting our planters made and distributed to the schools. If there's anybody got any questions, I'll see what I can do to answer them for you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul and Louise. Obviously some excellent work going on there, as I would have anticipated. Chris, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was interested in your item about the Boys Respect group, which you take place at appears to at a theatre. I wonder if you tell me a bit more about that, please.
Well, that's a group that's run at the Seagull Theatre in Lowestoft. The Seagull Theatre is a little private theatre, only has about 300 seats available to it, but does an awful lot of work within the community. And these are they did one originally for girls in the community, and now they have produced a similar thing just for boys, to enable them to get together and learn and become part of a theatre company to try and see how they go.
Sorry, can I just add in there, Paul? It was aimed at mental health and well-being for young boys. It went really well with the girls, so they wanted to do one for the boys because it was often felt that boys were more difficult to engage with. So that was based at the Seagull, but it had a structured programme.
Oh. Thank you. I'm really interested to know is how you sort of tended to identify people with those kind of needs, or do you just open it up to let anybody in who feels they'd like to be involved?
I think the Seagull themselves targeted the young people that were known to them to actually go to the group, to my knowledge.
It might well, if I can just jump in, it might well be something that'd be worth bringing up at the chairs meeting, Chris, and because you probably after a bit more detail than we can go into here.
But it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Letitia.
Thank you, Steve. I was just going to say, if there were no more questions, I just wanted to mention as well that there is an update for all of the other community partnerships, including this evening's pack. We've just got 2, obviously, that are coming to give us a fuller briefing. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So, as we say, the idea of this section is really just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, to give all the members of the board a little bit of a snapshot on what's happening around the community partnerships. And clearly, we can't cover off all 8. But as Letitia said, there is further information in there. So many thanks, Paul, Louise. Thank you very much for that. And I'll take us on, if I may, to item 5, which is what we focus on, Community Partnership Board priorities. And that's in the very, very safe hands of Nicole. Nicole, over to you.
Thank you. So this paper brings together thinking about priorities for the board, and we've discussed priorities in lots of different places, some of the task and finish groups, but we've also had the revised data pack that was produced for us by the Suffolk Office of Data Analytics, and we've included the full pack in the meeting papers so that you as board members had time to reflect on the contents of that, particularly those that weren't able to join the session on November the 5th that we had at Trinity Park. So the paper tries to bring together 3 main inputs. So the first one's just a reminder about the existing board priorities. So the 3 that were agreed originally, plus COVID community recovery. Then at the June meeting of the board, and again at September meeting, we discussed the 9 strategic partner priorities. So these were we'd asked 7 strategic partners to identify their priorities, and between them that's identified 9 priorities. And then obviously there was the priorities that emerged from the discussion at the Trinity Park events. So they are listed in paragraph 7, and they're also there's a much fuller summary at the back behind the data pack in your pack for the meeting papers today, which is the full write-up from the event on the 5th of November. So we've summarised the combined priorities in paragraph 8, so that brings together existing board priorities, COVID recovery priorities identified by the strategic partner, and the priorities from the 5th of November. And so we're proposing a number of things within the rest of the paper, and I'll just summarise that and try and pull that all together. So I think everybody was agreed that, and certainly the event on the 5th of November seemed to support the fact that we need to continue to focus on the 3 priorities that we've already agreed. So they are isolation and loneliness, transport and travel, and mental health and wellbeing. And just a couple of updates. So in relation to the first one, isolation and loneliness, we are proposing to hold an East Suffolk event prior to the forum in March to refocus in on isolation and loneliness. We've also we did a survey through the most recent issue of the East Suffolk magazine, which asked a specific question about loneliness, and we've got a number of people identified through that who are keen to talk to us more about that. Roughly about 5% of the respondents to that survey said that they often felt lonely. So we would like to work with some of those people and actually have a think about what else we could do to support them. And as I mentioned earlier, we are proposing to set up a task and finish group to focus on mental health and wellbeing. And John has kindly offered to be the first member of that, which I was hoping would be the result. The second proposal is that we set up a tackling inequalities task and finish group to focus on some of the things that came out of the event on the 5th of November and absorb some of the work of the COVID impacts task and finish group. But we'd like to focus that work initially on income deprivation and health inequalities. And that links very much to a paper that has been produced by the Beccles, Bungay and Halesworth Community Partnership, which was included as the third appendix to this agenda item. And there was a conversation at their last meeting about the impact of things like the cost of living increases, fuel, both heating and petrol diesel fuel increases, and also transport to school costs. As real issues that they were concerned about and felt strongly enough about that they wanted to escalate them up to the board level for wider consideration. And so I think that tackling inequalities task and finish group, which we're proposing to set up, I think has got a number of areas of focus, but could pull together a few strands of work. I think just in relation to health inequalities, it's really important that we as East Suffolk Council, but also as community partnership board partners, continue to work with the emerging integrated care systems for Norfolk and Waveney and Suffolk and North East Essex to ensure that they give priority to health inequalities, particularly the new integrated care partnerships, which are involving a much wider range of partners. We are proposing to work with key partners, including Suffolk Public Health and our leisure providers, to focus on obesity and focusing that work on 3 specific community partnership areas. So Sharon has already referenced that in terms of healthy weight, Felixstowe is now the community partnership area with the highest number of children who are obese or overweight. But clearly this builds on work that we've already been doing in the Lowestoft area, including through a big national funding bid that we put in that unfortunately wasn't successful, but we are trying to find the money to do that work anyway, which is very much based on the Amsterdam model, which interestingly picks up on some of the things that John was talking around sleep and the importance of sleep to people's mental health and well-being, as well as things like activity, eating well. The next area was considering the role of the board in terms of tackling the climate emergency, and I know that the chair wants to comment on that. So just to conclude the introduction, we'll be contacting board members shortly to ask you to express an interest in joining the mental health and wellbeing and tackling inequalities task and finish groups. But if anybody is interested and would like to put themselves forward this evening, that would be great. But that is how we're proposing to take some of these areas forward, just have some real specific task and finish groups that pick up on the issues that have come out of conversations at the recent board meetings and the event on the 5th of November. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nicole. And I think what's important to us is what's important to me, I should say, I should speak for the I, is that, you know, these task and finish groups have proved exceptionally successful in really bespoke piece of work that are drilling down and understanding the issues and then coming up with meaningful plans and commissioning work in order to address them. And that works by far the best when we have members from various organizations that can bring something to that picture, because I think you know, other than that, what you get is East Suffolk Council scribbling around in the background trying to sort stuff out. It's much better if we've got a full partnership approach. So in particular, those that are on this call, members of the board that are not East Suffolk Council employees or members, we'd be really keen to hear from you as to be part of those task and finish groups. I think that's exceptionally important if they're going to be successful. I don't propose going through all the recommendations again that Nicole has very, very eloquently outlined. She did mention that I wanted to particularly pick up on on item E, I think, which is that a specific task and finish group be convened to consider the issues of climate change and the role of board in tackling the climate emergency. I am yet to be convinced that this board at this moment in time has enough resource and enough time to dedicate to what is a really, really important issue. I know that each of our partner organisations is doing a lot of work around that, and what I don't want is to set this board up to end up duplicating the work that is already going on. In East Suffolk Council, for instance, we've got our environmental task group led by James, who's on the call this evening. So I don't want to get particularly tied down in that at this stage. Now, I believe at the next Community Partnership Board meeting, we've got the Green Pimp Forum coming to give us a bit of an update on the work that they're doing and what's going on from their perspective across East Suffolk. So I would be less inclined to go with that particular recommendation at this stage, but we could absolutely review that at the next meeting once we've had an update from them. But other than that, I mean, I would support the proposals that are set out within your papers in paragraph 9 to 14. So that would be A to D in there, so that we can look at how we're setting that up. And as I say, if people really want to, if people want to put their hand up now and say, I'd like to get involved in those groups, then absolutely fine. But failing that, Nicole and Luke will be in contact with you all to see if we can pressurise, cajole, or indeed note your volunteers that want to be involved in those task and finish groups. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments on that part of the papers. Any questions or comments? No, excellent. I'm not seeing any hands up there. So I suppose, board members, what I'm asking for is your consensus that you agree the proposals set out in paragraph 9 to 14. That's A to D. I say I'm going to remove E at this time, and we will revisit that after our presentation that we receive at the next meeting. So is everybody happy with that? If you're not, speak now or forever hold your peace. I shall take that as confirmation that we're happy with that, Nicole, if that's okay, and we shall record that as such. Excellent. In that case, I think I shall move us on. And I shall move us on to item 6. Oh, I think I've got that as well. Let me have a look. Got some notes here somewhere. Excellent. So item 6 is our how we work the peer challenge, the community partnership draft action plan, pages 63 to 70 on your papers there. So page 63 of the pack sort of provides an overview of the local government association peer challenge of our community partnerships, which was held in October. And first of all, can I just thank everybody, all those board members who participated in that process. It was a really, really valuable process. It allowed us to bring people from the outside that were involved in local government elsewhere to come in and look at what we're doing and see how it's going, and to give that critical friend overview of the process that we've set in place. So page 63, it sets out who was involved, when it happened, the purpose around that, and around the key themes, the 3 key themes that they focused in, which was people, processes, and the outcomes. They presented their findings, the peer challenge team presented their findings back to us on the 14th of October, and it included both insights and recommendations. And you'll see 3.1 and 3.2 of the report outline those. And the main focus, it was the main focus of the visioning event that I know many of you came to, which we held on November the 5th at Trinity Park. And there was a number of key questions that we posed to everyone at the event was, how can we learn from and respond to the recommendations that had been identified through the peer challenge process. And the output of the workshop sessions, which generate lots of conversations on the table, lots of ideas, and we collated those. They were collated. That wasn't the we, because I didn't do it. Others did it for me, which we're very, very grateful for, into a draft action plan, which you'll find is attached to the papers you've got there at Appendix 1 to the report. And these are arranged by 5 sort of focus areas, I suppose. So we've got the people and around the community leadership, engagement, communications, the processes around communications, the process around the form and the processes that we go through in order to allocate funds and deal with issues, and then the outcomes. And this really key area of oversight and evaluation. We really need to continue to have this good oversight of what we're spending our money on, and to make sure that we are evaluating that, to make sure that it's actually ticking those boxes that we thought it would tick in the first place. So it is proposed that the board considers, what we're asking you to consider is the draft action plan, and hopefully to agree to receive a further report at the March board meeting, which will be updating you on the progress against some of those actions. And some of those are already underway, of course, and prioritising the other actions within the plan into a more manageable number, because at the moment it's just a big list of stuff we need to do, but some of those will need to be put into some sort of priority. It's important, I think, for the board to note that some actions are already underway for, that we're doing some stuff already. A learning and development plan is already in place. We've now got an allocated communications resource from within our comms team at East Suffolk Council, and we've already proposed a community partnership e-bulletin, which I think is really important, because one of the key bits of feedback that came from this was actually not sure that the community partnerships knew what was going on. As Chris was asking questions this evening, and quite rightly, of Paul about, well, what did that look like? How did that come about? And really, we should have that flow of communications. Chris should know the answer to that before he posed the question. So we need to make sure that community partnerships are well linked in with each other, so that we can share ideas, stop duplication, and do all the other things that are going on. So the board this evening's asked to identify any specific actions that you'd like to prioritise from the action plan, and to task the steering delivery group, who sit behind us as a board, to progress the actions and report back to the board, hopefully in March, if that's okay. But I've done a lot of talking there. I'm not sure I've said a lot, but I've done a lot of talking, so I'll pause there to see if anyone's got any questions or comments. No, that's what I like to see. So I must have said something, either that or you've all nodded off. So the plan really is, if I've got this right, Nicole, is for this to come back to the next board meeting in a more usable format that members can sign up to. Is that right?
It is. I think when we looked at what had come out of the event, there's a mixture of comments and then very specific actions, and I think we'd like to refine that a bit further, and have a few key actions for each of the 5 sections. So yes, we'll refine it and bring it back to the March meeting. But it would be good to hear if anybody's got anything that they think is particularly important that they want to pull out as a priority.
Thank you, Nicole. So members, what I'd be asking you to do is, between now and the next sort of, week or so, please do have a good look at the documents that we provided. If there's anything in there that makes you think, actually, that's the one, we need to be doing that, then please do feed that back into Nicole and the team, so that we can they can put that in the mix as they're sorting stuff out. So yeah, please do that. Okay, I shall move us on then, if I may, unless I missed anything there, on to item 7, which is the Community Partnership Forum update. In respect of this, we're our current thinking around the sort of aims and structure of the event. I think Luke's going to come in here and give us a bit of that and talk about priorities, etc. Luke, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, this item has been to the board previously, so I won't spend too much time on it. But it's clearly it's been a bit of a moving feast, really. But there is now the real desire for the face-to-face forum to happen again, and the date's been postponed. But as the report says, Trinity Park is now booked for the 25th of March 2022. So we're working to that date. The certainties are, the purpose and the purpose of the event. That's clearly been laid out by the board previously, and the offer that we want to give to delegates that come, and that's laid out within the report. The theme, I think that this is something that's been discussed while we've been developing thoughts around the event, and it's really sort of two-pronged attack. One is obviously to focus on the priorities of the community partnerships and the community partnership board, and really to bring partners around some of those sticky issues. I mean, it's worked well in the past with the face-to-face forum, so we'd like to put that to you as a kind of a key reason. But we've also had the peer review and the challenges that's thrown up, and some of that I think can really feed into some great workshops and great seminars that could be laid on as part of the programme, and that's really laid out in the content under item 6. So again, I won't read that verbatim, but I think you'll see that clearly reflects the previous item, the outcomes of the peer review. As far as the sort of the uncertainties, obviously it's whether or not what the situation is going to be in March, and I think we're going to have to leave that as an element of flexibility in arrangements. Obviously, we do want a full event of 200 delegates face to face, but with COVID, we can't be entirely sure, as you know. But one thing that I just wanted to sort of get clarification on tonight is around the idea of having a run up to the actual event with some smaller events, be it online or face to face. And in conversations with the events management team at ILGA, the issue came up about would that actually potentially draw attendance away from the main event on the Friday. People's time is valuable and they may not be able to attend more than one during the week and have to make a decision between the two. So I'm suggesting that potentially that they don't necessarily take place that close to the event. They can be hosted through February and March leading up to the forum, or we could indeed extend it to a programme throughout the year and take events around the district, and in that way people could focus on ensuring that they have the time to come on the Friday and come to the main event. So that's really one question that's in the report, just for clarity. Apart from that, it's really asking the board to agree the approach that's laid out so that we can crack on. There's not that long left, so we need to crack on and actually get this thing organised. And secondly, really for board members to come forward in a similar way as last time, come forward and with offers as to how you feel you could actually help to make the event a success. I mean, there's a lot of skills around the board table, so if anyone feels they or their organisation could take a lead on a workshop potentially, or could provide a speaker, then we'd be very interested in hearing. Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Luke. I mean, the thing that springs to mind to me, I've already been singing the praises of the task and finish groups, and the good work that they're doing. So I think if there was going to be a lead into the conference, then I think that those would be the right groups to take that lead. So if I would like to see the task and finish groups perhaps giving that some thought as to whether there is some value in each of those groups, perhaps having a fringe, a pre-workshop something where they could engage with wider members of the board and wider members of the community in a pre-conference session, and that we could then provide feedback back in on the 25th of March to that, because I think that will give a bit of focus to what it is that we're trying to achieve as a board going forward, because those are our agreed priorities, and they're the people that know them in depth as to what it is that we're trying to achieve. So I think that would be my steer, unless someone's got a better suggestion than that. But I'm happy to take any other comments from anybody else if they have them. No, I'm not seeing any hands shoot up there, Luke. I'm sure we can press gang some people into being guest speakers, I'm sure. But you know, in the meantime, what I will ask is that everyone puts that date of the 25th of March into their diaries, so that we've got that there. And other than that, I think we are very happy with the approach that's being taken and the plans that are coming together. So many thanks for your work on that, Luke. And I know that that's a big piece of work to pull that together. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move on, if I may. When we're on to item 8, which is any other business. So just before I throw that out to the floor to see if anyone else has got anything, I suppose I just want to, you know, you've probably heard me mention it a couple of times already, to just talk about our meetings, the meetings of the board, and whether we would be comfortable going back to a face-to-face meeting as opposed to a virtual meeting. I think there is a lot of benefit in respect of networking and general engagement in the meeting, rather than listening to me. I can sit at the back of the room and fall asleep. So I would be very pleased to go back to face-to-face meetings. But of course that does mean some travel, which of course has a carbon footprint that comes with that. And also, of course, you know, we need to consider the locations of those meetings. So our next meetings, I think, is on the when have we got our forward plan is on March 20. March next year, is that the date of our next meeting? Have I got that right?
7th of March next year, Steve.
Thank you. 7th of March next year. It would be nice to plan that as a face-to-face meeting, if members would be happy with that. Now, obviously, Suffolk Council has 2 facilities, one in Lowestoft and one at Melton. Of course, we're not tied to our facilities. If someone has something else they want to offer, then we'd be only too happy with that. But the question really is, are members happy to go for the next meeting to be face-to-face in March? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Tom?
Well, I'm supportive of it, but obviously subject to whatever the regulations are at the time. But just reflecting back on the presentation from earlier, I had no idea how much I missed the people I worked with. It quite surprised me, to be honest, when I came back. So I think we probably all benefit from getting together. So I think the aim of coming together, subject to guidance, is a good one.
Thanks, Tom. I agree with you. Tony?
Steve, what about Hinton? Would that be halfway house rather than up or down?
Well, sorry, say that again.
Hinton, where we normally go to sometimes, and we had the full council meetings, haven't we?
Yeah, it's a cost thing really, more than anything else. But I think, you know, the last thing I want to do is spend board money on hiring premises. I don't think I've got any of my colleagues from the constabulary here, but they've got a really nice halfway house at Halesworth, of course. I don't know if their conference room is still available. I know that's something we've used at Halesworth Police Station in the past, but we can certainly look at venues. Chris, did you want to come in?
It's easier for Lowestoft and easier for Lowestoft, isn't it? You know, halfway somewhere between the two would be nice for them. Doesn't worry me because I'm in the middle.
Yeah. Okay, Chris.
Just to say, I'd be happy to join in wherever we meet. I'm quite happy about all that. And I was thinking about possibly joining a group as well, but I'll talk about that another time.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I'm grateful. Okay, members, and let's let's plan, if we can, for our meeting in March to be a face-to-face meeting. I'll leave it to Luke and to come up with a suitable location within a small budget. And if we have to travel some distance to the north of my district on that occasion, or indeed to the south, then we'll make sure that the following time we don't travel as far. So we can move them about between the north and the south as they come up. But of course, there's always going to be some travel involved in that. But please do car share. Please do think about public transport if it works for you, and all the other things that that I know James would be desperate to say. Okay, I'm going to offer any other business. Anybody got anything else they want to raise at this point? No. Okay. Oh no, nothing there. Right. I think that's it now. We've concluded the business on the agenda. I'd like to thank you all for attending. And of course, I would love to wish you all a very, very happy Christmas, those of you that celebrate it, and a very healthy and peaceful 2022 would be equally nice. If I could ask you all just to keep your microphones muted and your cameras off until Matt has stopped the recording, and then we won't get anybody rushing out the room on the YouTube channel. Matt.
Thank you, Steve. I will just end the recording now.